Can you hear me now? Yes. Fantastic. You didn't miss much if you didn't hear me, don't worry. We're talking about Ethereum, and my question is, what even is Ethereum? And I'm pretty sure that if I were to ask 10 of you what Ethereum is, I would get at least 5 different responses. Some of you might describe it as an infinite garden, or ultrasound money. Some of you might describe it as a settlement layer. God forbid, one of you might even describe it as Bitcoin plus smart contracts. But you know what? You would all be right. There are so many ways to describe Ethereum because there are so many ways to use it. And to that extent, we can kind of think of Ethereum as a commons, like forests or fisheries. What are commons? They are an area or shared resource that is accessible to and used by the public. Unfortunately, like all commons, this resource can be abused. And I'm of course talking about the tragedy of the commons, which is when individuals act in their own self-interest, depleting shared resources to the detriment of everyone else. And that's why I have Moloch here, who you may know we like to use in Ethereum to symbolize coordination failures. And Moloch, he's holding up a tweet by Amin Soleimani, where Amin is calling out the lack of adequate funding for Ethereum's core protocol work. And the issue that he highlights is that essentially we have this situation where we have a small number of relatively underpaid core protocol contributors who are responsible for infrastructure securing billions in value. And that's not great. It means that it is not economically rational to work on Ethereum's core protocol. And so we've visualized this issue in this chart here, where you can see that Ethereum's core protocol work is both low risk and low reward. But crucially, it also shows how by just taking on a little bit more risk, these core devs could significantly increase their rewards. For example, by going to work for a large crypto project with a token, like a layer 2 or even an exchange. Yeah. Why does this matter? Well, because Ethereum is still far from being done. If you are at all familiar with Ethereum's core protocol development roadmap, you know that there are a ton of really, really exciting upgrades, both in the short term and in the long term. And of course, everyone wants those upgrades sooner rather than later. But the reality is that if we want to execute this development roadmap, it is imperative that we are able to onboard and retain these talented core protocol contributors. So this brings up kind of an existential question for Ethereum. How do we rebalance financial incentives to make Ethereum's core protocol work economically rational on a risk-adjusted basis? So let's brainstorm. What about altruism, right? Can we rely on kind individuals to fund this work out of the goodness of their hearts? Well, this is Ethereum we're talking about, so there are some examples of this. Here's a tweet from Preston Van Loon of the Prism client team, who tweeted back in 2018 about the lack of funding for the Prism team. Now, fortunately for Preston, some guy replied YOLO and sent 1,000 ETH, which at the time was worth around $100,000. But is that something that we can rely on? No, it's not sustainable. It also has a risk of capture because, quite frankly, we don't know if these kind individuals actually have ulterior motives. And it's also narrowly targeted because, of course, not all core devs are on Twitter asking for money, and not all core devs have the reach of someone like Preston. So what else can we do? What about making Ethereum's holders pay? And you know, there has been an EIP to propose doing this, essentially carving out a portion of Ethereum's issuance to pay for Ethereum's core protocol work. And blockchains like Polkadot, we got anyone from Polkadot here? Just sponsoring, not attending? Come on, guys. Polkadot does this, why can't Ethereum? Well, because it's not credibly neutral, right? Ethereum was created to give power back to the people. And that does not include forcing a paycheck for every single core dev into every single block. At the same time, it would also be something that would be really hard to change if we implemented it but then regretted it. Protocol changes cannot be made willy-nilly in Ethereum, and that's absolutely a feature and not a bug. And also, if we were to establish this precedent of diluting ETH holders to pay for this kind of stuff, you know there would be another group of individuals that would pop up in the future and say, hey, pay me in the same way. So it's kind of a slippery slope. Okay, what about building social norms? Here we have a tweet from the man, the legend, Danny Ryan, back in October of 2021, where he said, make it a social norm for all projects building on Ethereum to allocate 1.5% of their token to the individuals who are building and designing the L1 infrastructure they rely on. Danny's a pretty smart guy. There's a lot of really, really interesting stuff in this tweet. Number one, it would target individuals and not teams, so you know that funding would go to the actual people who are doing the work you want to support. It would also give those individuals exposure to the upside being created in the ecosystem via these tokens, and it would be a cost borne by the projects themselves, i.e. the people who have a dependency on Ethereum's core protocol, not the users. And if we actually successfully establish this as a social norm, it would have a low risk of capture, if most of the projects are doing this, and even more so, it could be sustainable. So, great idea, but we're missing something. How would you actually distribute those tokens? So let's take a step back. What we want to do is we want to build new social norms around projects building on Ethereum, donating a portion of their supply to support Ethereum's core protocol development, to help rebalance financial incentives. What we're missing is a mechanism which distributes those ecosystem tokens to Ethereum's core protocol contributors in a way that's sufficiently fair, remains accurate over time, and crucially, maintains Ethereum's credible neutrality. Now, you might be able to guess what I'm getting at because I've just described Protocol Guild. And to understand how Protocol Guild can be used to rebalance these financial incentives for Ethereum's core protocol work, you need to understand its two core components, a membership registry and a funding mechanism. So let's talk about the registry. First and foremost, Protocol Guild is a membership registry of Ethereum's active core protocol contributors. Today, we have 187 of these individuals in this list. You can see all their names in the background there. And these are people from all over the world. What are they working on? Well, broadly speaking, their work targets three areas of the core protocol, which includes client development, research and implementation experiments, as well as work that supports those first two, which includes spec work, testing, security, infra, and coordination. Here are some examples of teams that you may have heard of. You may have heard of clients like Geth, Aragon, Besu, Nethermind. You may have heard like research groups like the Robust Incentive Group. And you may have heard of coordination teams like Ethereum Cat Herders. But Protocol Guild membership is centered around individuals, not teams. So if you're hired by one of these teams and you do good work, but you quit, but you continue doing good work, you would remain a Protocol Guild member. Now, I did also say it was a list of active core protocol contributors, so let's quantify that. To be eligible for membership, you need to have contributed for at least 6 months continuously. But on average, Protocol Guild members have contributed over 3 years to Ethereum's core protocol work. The longest serving member has been there from the start, over 10 years now. As a collective, Protocol Guild members have contributed over 600 years to Ethereum's core protocol work, which is why we can confidently say that these individuals are stewarding Ethereum's core protocol. You might be wondering, how is this list updated? How is it curated? And well, it is actually Protocol Guild members themselves who coordinate to add and remove members. And if you think about it, this makes the most sense because the reality is most individuals, they don't have the necessary domain expertise or context to be able to both identify who these individuals are and then also track their contributions over time. On the other hand, Protocol Guild members, due to the very nature of their day-to-day work as core devs, they have all the necessary context, they have all the necessary domain expertise to both create this list and update it over time. So what is the net result of all this? Well, we've made the entire set of Ethereum's core protocol contributors directly legible on-chain. All right, well, how does that rebalance incentives? Well, we've built a funding mechanism around this list. So let's talk a little bit more about how this funding mechanism works. And there's 3 parts that are kind of unique in the way that donations are received, in the way that they're vested and then distributed. And so first and foremost, we've created a single Ethereum address that anyone can use to send tokens directly to everyone in this membership registry. So think about how much complexity we've removed associated with trying to figure out who to donate to if you want to support this work. And of course, because this is on-chain, anyone can verify who has donated. Anyone can verify that, in fact, donations are going to everyone in this list. But what actually happens when you make a donation? Our donation address is actually an immutable vesting contract, which trustlessly vests funds over 4 years from the point of donation. The contract cannot do anything else. Why 4-year vesting? Well, because 4-year vesting is the norm when it comes to token grants or employee stock options. But more importantly, 4 years provide strong incentives for these contributors to stick around for the long term. And finally, how are the funds actually distributed to this membership registry? And ask anyone who's building a public goods funding program, it's really hard to do so in a fair way. And so at Protocol Guild, we sidestep that complexity by using the most neutral impact measurement that we know, which is time. And so the longer you've been contributing, the higher your share of donated funds. But we also don't want the longest-serving members to run away with all of the funding, so we do also introduce a square root function into our formula to basically compress that variance. And it has the effect of newer members, their share is actually increasing at a much more rapid pace compared to more long-term members. And in fact, as new members are brought in or onboarded, the older members, their share is getting diluted over time. So for all these different reasons, we think it's fair to say that Protocol Guild's funding mechanism is simple and transparent, while creating strong incentives to onboard and retain Ethereum's core protocol contributors over the long term, thus enabling Ethereum's ecosystem to fund its dependencies. And that last part's really important because it brings us back to this idea of social norms. And that brings me to the Protocol Guild Pledge. How many of you have heard of the Protocol Guild Pledge? Not bad, maybe a third. Keep your hand up if you are a project that might be planning on taking the Protocol Guild Pledge. Woo! That's awesome. If you're thinking about it, catch me afterwards. What is the Protocol Guild Pledge? I'm pretty sure you can guess. It is a commitment by projects building on Ethereum to donate 1% of their native tokens to support Ethereum's core protocol to work via the Protocol Guild. So let's unpack this. Why are we asking for native tokens, right? Why are we not asking for ETH or stables? Well, because think about it. What you do by donating tokens is you're giving Ethereum's core protocol contributors access to a diversified basket of funds that represents the value being created in the ecosystem. But most importantly, you are enabling them to benefit from that while staying focused on their core protocol work. Basically, everyone's in the same boat. Why are we asking for 1%? Why not a fixed dollar amount? Well, because denominating the pledge in a percentage helps to normalize contributions. Not all projects can make, say, a $10 million donation, but every project, no matter how big or how small, could make a 1% donation. It's also pretty easy to pledge. You could take this pledge before you even have a token, before you even know the value of your token. It also abstracts volatility because, of course, a 1% donation will always be worth 1%, even in a bear market. And lastly, why 1%? Why not 1.5% like Danny Ryan suggested? Well, because Danny was wrong. No, I'm just kidding. Because we did the math, and we figured that if we can establish this pledge, or rather this norm around taking the pledge, then 1% is more or less sufficient. Why take the pledge at all? Well, you guys came to this conference, so hopefully you already know this, but fund your dependency. If you're building on Ethereum, you have a dependency on Ethereum's core protocol development. Might be for data availability, might be for uptime. By taking the pledge, you are helping to rebalance these financial incentives to make sure these talented core protocol contributors stick around to keep building and maintaining the protocol that you depend on. It also contributes to a more resilient Ethereum by providing a new diversified funding stream for that work, and it scales Ethereum's values. Public goods are good. Ethereum's core protocol development is a foundational public good. How to take the pledge? It's very simple. You just tweet or cast about it. And so here are the first 3 projects that took the pledge. Shout out to EtherFi, Tyco, and PwnDAO. PwnDAO is a sponsor here, so go check out their booth. And that's all you need to do. Just announce it publicly, and when you have your token, follow up and make the donation. All right, so now you know all about Protocol Guild, you know about the pledge. So you might be wondering, is Ethereum's core protocol development economically rational yet? Has Protocol Guild actually done something? And the answer is, we're getting there. So since being launched in May of 2022, we have received over 8,000 donations, and we have raised almost $180 million. But that was at the time of donation. The current value of that is $120 million. And I should also clarify that the vast majority of that came from 3 projects that took the pledge: Eigenlayer, EtherFi, and Tycho Labs. Shout out to them. But as you can see in our donor leaderboard, we have received substantial donations from many different projects in the ecosystem. But I know what you're thinking. Almost $180 million or almost $120 million? That's a lot of money. Protocol Guild does not need any more money. And it's not quite the case, because remember, we have 187 members today. Every quarter, we are onboarding new core protocol contributors. And also remember that this funding is being vested over 4 years. And so what that means is that actually the median Protocol Guild member is expected to receive approximately $110,000 from Protocol Guild over the next 12 months. And look, $110,000 is a lot of money. But for these individuals, it is not enough to replace a full-time salary, and that's why they have full-time jobs that pay them in addition to what they get here. But more importantly, it is not enough to compete with the type of job offers that they are getting in the ecosystem, which are frequently low 7-figure job offers. And so if we want to get to a place where the financial incentives associated with Protocol Guild membership alone are enough to onboard and retain Ethereum's core protocol contributors so they can finish executing the roadmap, we need to significantly scale our fundraising. So no, Ethereum's core protocol development is still not economically rational work. Here's a tweet from a very prominent core dev at the start of last year who announced that he was moving on to go work for a layer 2, and he did, in his farewell tweet, say that Protocol Guild almost made him stay. So we still have some work to do. But you know what? The initial results are incredibly promising. And we believe that if we can establish this social norm that projects building on Ethereum donate a portion of their token supply to help fund Ethereum's core protocol work, to help make these contributors stick around for the long term, to execute the roadmap, then I think we can make it economically rational. And so my call out to you, if you know a project that is planning a token launch, please let them know that you would like them to take the Protocol Guild pledge together. That way we can all help secure the future of Ethereum together. Thank you very much.